it's Cheryl, and in this video I want to walk you through some watercolor basics. We're going to practice some essential beginner brush strokes using watercolor. Let's get started. So what you'll need is a round brush. I'm suggesting either an 8 or a size 10. These are Princeton brushes, or anything that you have on hand would be just fine. I'm using a little bit of tube watercolor. Again, you can use whatever you have on hand. I have a little porcelain tray, some water. I have a pencil and a ruler. And I have a small pad of Strathmore watercolor paper. It's cold press. It's about 6 by 9 inches. And the weight is 300 GSM, or 140 pounds. You don't want to use anything lighter than that because paper tends to buckle with watercolor. But again, use whatever you have on hand. I'm just going to take a minute to set up some lines for this exercise with a ruler and a pencil. And this makes a handy little reference chart for these little exercises that we're going to go through. And you can save this and use it any time as a reference sheet to practice some basic brush strokes. If you don't want to use the ruler and the pencil, you're free to just do it however you want to do it on plain paper. We're going to add a little bit of watercolor to the palette. I'm going to add some water to the paint to make a little bit of a paint watercolor soup mix. I'm just going to add water and stir the water into the paint glob, and add a little bit more water so that we just have a pool of watercolor, pool of pigmented water. And we're just going to use that with our brush to dip back into and do our exercises that way. I'm going to dip my brush into the pile and dab it onto the paper towel that I have handy there. And I'm going to start, the first brush stroke is just a straight line. Using the very tip of the brush, you'll notice that my hand is resting somewhat on the paper, but I'm using the tip of the brush to make lines. And this is a good steadying exercise. It's just this repetition and rhythm to try to steady your hand. And sometimes your hand's more wobbly than other times, but the more you practice with the strokes, the more you get into the habit of kind of just the beautiful rhythm that painting with watercolor can have. And these strokes will help you to develop your eye and hand coordination a little bit and help you understand the flow of the watercolor. So for this first block, just begin the line at the top of the page and slowly draw the paint down to the end of the block, and then take the next stroke and add it as close as you can to the previous stroke without having the lines bump into each other. And if you make a mistake, there's no worries. It's just practice. As you can see, I've pulled out some of that water and put it in a separate pool so that there's just less of it to draw from. In this next exercise, we're going to do the same thing and horizontally take the lines across the page. And you can see how I've got the brush tilted a little bit, but I'm using the very tip of the brush. Now I'm pushing down on the belly of the brush to get a wider stroke. And this is something that you'll be able to do. Even this size brush that's pretty big, you can get a variety of marks. And now I'm just going to dip my brush in, and you see the changing position of my hand. I'm going back to that tip of the brush. The very point of the brush can give you a really nice variety of marks. So we have a medium stroke, a wide stroke, and a sort of thin stroke. In the next one, I'm going to go to the next block, and we're going to do a little bit of a pressing down, lifting up, pressing down, and lifting up to alternate between fat and thin lines. So in this one, we're going to press down and lift up, press down and lift up. And it takes a little bit of a rhythm. If you haven't done it, and this one I haven't done it in a while, and it's a little bit, it takes a little bit of practice to just get into the flow and the rhythm of it. And you just keep practicing. So you get the idea. These don't have to be perfect. You can just begin to see how the practicing of these kind of marks and exercises can make you begin to appreciate the beauty of watercolor and the variety of the marks that you can get with each stroke. Okay, next we are going to move on to the next block. I'm moving down to exercise number 4, which is to just make some half leaf shapes, these little sort of half moons. I start by pressing down and making a half oval shape, and then lifting the brush up. Press down and lift up into these little half moon shapes. And see the variety between thick and thin. And sometimes they come out great, and other times they are a little wobbly, but it's just practice. And I'm practicing using my hand and the tip, both the belly of the brush and the tip of the brush. In the next block, we're going to move over to just creating circles. And you'll start by pressing down, lifting up, and then closing it in by adding another half circle on top of the one that you made. So press down, make a half circle, and add another one to close in the circle, and repeat it. Half circle, and add another circle to close it in. And you can see that this is a good basic stroke practice for controlling the brush. In the next exercise, we're going to move over and we're going to take and make some just some wiggly marks, lifting the brush up and then pressing down as you descend. On the upstroke, thin, fatter on the downstroke, thin, fatter on the downstroke. And keep repeating that as you go through. It gives you sort of a sense of rhythm or waves. In this next exercise, we're just going to take everything that we've done and put together a little leaf shape. First, I'm drawing a stem on this one, and then I'm using my brush stroke from fat to thin to make a leaf shape. You can see that I'm using the half moon shape and then just joining them together at the end to create a gentle oval shape of a leaf. Very abstract leaf, but that's okay. It's all practice. You can see I've left a little bit of white space, which is kind of like the illusion of a stem, the vein of a leaf. And filling in the square when the leaves are scattering and moving all around. In the next one, we're going to take ourselves back to a more playful element, and using everything that we have, we're going to practice using different parts of the brush. I'm going to make some dots using the little tip of the brush, and then I'm going to make some scattered marks. This is a very abstract, playful little area of the exercise where we can just see all the different marks that the brush can make. And you can actually just draw with watercolor. It's really a lot of fun to just make all kinds of marks and practice. I'm drying off the brush on the paper towel and using some dry brush and scratching through, changing the way I'm holding the brush and making it kind of point up and down, using the belly of the brush, the side of the brush, and adding all kinds of variety to the marks to just see what is it that I can use the brush to create what kind of energy, what kind of marks. And the more you do this, the more you're going to discover your own language and your own way of working with watercolor. It can be so much fun. So I continue to fill in the block and add more and more layers over the drying paint. That would be an example of painting wet on dry. And I've also now added a little bit of water to the drying areas to give a little bit of a wash on top of the work that I've done, so you can see that you can create some light marks and sort of puddles of water. And when it dries, it will look a little bit different than it does when it is wet. And in the last block, I'm going to just paint a large, soupy layer of paint. And I'm just going to explore dropping water in and then drawing that pool down to the edge of the paper, just to give you the idea of watch what happens when you add water to your pigment, and see the beautiful, beautiful trail of texture that gets made when you play with the watercolor in all the unexpected ways that water can push the pigment around and create these beautiful feels of color. So this would be a kind of an ombre effect. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. Thanks for stopping by.